Okay, hi again. Now looking at all of those various websites, all dedicated to these issues of housing and affordability, you can see that this is an area that requires some study and some skill, some knowledge in order to become good at it. If you are interested in the work of community development, there is no more frustrating and challenging issue than housing. And I want to just pick up some thoughts here and move us into the next part of what I want you to go read. I think I ended before saying that housing really is more than just a neighborhood issue anymore. And specifically in the Chicago region, it's become a regional issue, and that is because of the destruction of public housing. Those of you who aren't from here don't have a sense of what public housing was like because it's now gone. I could show you pictures of blocks and blocks and blocks of empty land, and you could imagine what it looked like. Or you could just Google the Chicago Housing Authority and also a couple of other sources. The Encyclopedia of Chicago History is a wonderful one that will show you what those miles and miles and miles of identical buildings looked like and help you imagine what it was like and how many people lived there. But due to long-term disinvestment and corruption on the part of the city of Chicago, and a change in attitude toward public housing on a national level that took place during the late George H.W. Bush administrations, and then actually moving into the Clinton administration. There was a move toward getting rid of these warehousing the poor types of operations that public housing had become. And so, the city of Chicago undertook something called the Plan for Transformation, about 15 years ago, in which it planned to tear down the major public housing developments around the city and replace them with what they called mixed-income communities. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole history of that. If you're interested in it, all you have to do is put Chicago Housing Authority Plan for Transformation and start to read up on it and discover what actually happened there. But the end result of it is upon us now. All of the people who once lived in public housing don't live there anymore. And most of them were given vouchers. Section 8 vouchers. Now here's a piece of housing lingo if you don't know what Section 8 is. It's a commitment on the part of the government to pay your rent anything in excess of 30% of your income. But it requires you to go out on the private market and convince someone to take your voucher. And not all private landlords are interested in doing that. But the residents of public housing who qualified were given vouchers and promised that they could come back when the new housing was built. There were lots of hitches in that giddy up. Many people didn't qualify because one of the qualifications was that you were never behind on your rent and no one in your family had ever been involved with the police. Good luck with that. And then if you know anything about people who are struggling on the edges of economic disaster, they don't stay in touch real well. They might move 3 or 4 times. If the Public Housing Authority, the CHA, doesn't keep really, really good records, pretty soon, even though they were promised to come back, folks disappear. Many people think that's what really the CHA wanted to have happen, because right now there's not very good records of where any of the folks who left public housing are. And then the buildings were torn down, and then the contracts were put out to redevelopers who were going to build new mixed-income communities, which would be 15% former public housing residents and 85% a mixture of affordable units and market rate units. Now, what's affordability? Let me just stop here and talk about affordability for a minute. Affordability is a definition that is given by the federal government, and it is that for housing to be affordable, it should take no more than 30% of your monthly income. Now, they can't do that for every single person, so they use a measure called the AMI, the Area Median Income. And the AMI is determined by municipality or region. So 30% of annual area median income in, say, the wealthy North Shore suburbs is a different amount of money than 30% of area median income is in the city of Chicago. So the definition of affordable is fluid, and therefore when we start talking about affordable housing, we can actually talk about affordable housing in the wealthy suburbs as well. However, insofar as it affected the people who left public housing, they were the people who were at the lowest level of access to affordable housing, and so and generally, many of them had no income whatsoever. Their housing, therefore, was either 100% subsidized, or that 30% was 30% of not a lot. So those folks had to look for certain kinds of housing, and that housing was either in already very distressed neighborhoods in the city, or in what we call the inner ring suburbs, which were losing population and losing value, losing tax base. And so there are parts of the suburbs now, certain suburbs that I can call their names if you want to hear them, places like Carpentersville, places like almost the whole south suburban Cook area, like Harvey and Chicago Heights, that have whole developments of public housing en masse moved to them. There are also small towns in the middle of no place. A well-known one in Illinois is the town of Rantoul, which was once an Air Force base, and when the Air Force base closed, it had a lot of empty housing, and whole bunches of people from Robert Taylor Homes moved to Rantoul. Now, imagine being in the middle of a cornfield in Illinois in an old Air Force base, having come from Chicago's public housing, and you can imagine a culture shock. So that's a major issue right now in the reality of Chicago's housing. That we have exported the poor. I call it exporting the poor. People who are more involved in the policy from the city yell at me all the time because they say, no, we did a good thing, and we're bringing the ones back we can find. And we exported most of the poor people, and when you looked at those data sheets from the rehab network and you saw that Chicago's population has declined, and it almost exclusively is a decline of African Americans, that's part of the reason why. So, okay, what do we do about this? In this next bunch of websites I'm going to send you to, I'm going to introduce you to a few of the possible solutions that are being proposed. Most especially the one that I talked about in the DSNI section, the New Communities program of the Local Initiative Support Corporation. And then I'll come back and do one more little bunch of riffs on other strategies that are used to try to combat the lack of affordability and the loss of housing in the foreclosure crisis. And then that should be enough, and we'll go to the forum. But one more round of me.